Hey, Dan from danwagner.co with a quick tutorial on extracting bits of code from your existing subroutines when you know you're going to use some functionality over and over again, and you'll place that extracted bit of code into a subroutine or a function itself, depending on the questions that we talked about in the associated article. And so I'm going to apply this technique to the Add to Destination worksheet subroutine that was part of an earlier tutorial on how to filter blocks of data based on dates. So if you were to peruse the code for Add to Destination worksheet, you would find that there are a couple places where we are clearing auto filters safely, and whenever there are situations where we're doing exactly the same thing, like legitimately copy pasting the same code, that is a great opportunity to extract that functionality into its own subroutine or function. So up here, in this particular case, if we overfilter this range, the code clears the auto filter mode on that worksheet, and it also applies show all data if the filter mode is set to true, and then it exits the sub in this particular case. Later, in the same subroutine, we again clear those auto filters safely, right? First, we turn auto filter mode to false, and again, we check the filter mode to see if it's set to true, and if that's the case, we call show all data. So, in this situation, we want to go ahead and extract this functionality out into its own subroutine. So the first question is, am I legitimately copy pasting code? And we already answered that yes. The second question is, does this block of code that I'm copy pasting return something? Like, am I setting a variable value in this block of code? In this particular case, the answer is no. We're not assigning a variable in this case. We're simply applying some operations to the worksheet that houses our data. So based on question number 2, we know we're going to use a subroutine. And finally, question number 3 is, are we operating on something specifically? And the answer to that is yes. We're working on this sheet 1 worksheet in this case, but in general, we're working on a worksheet, right? And so the argument to this subroutine is going to be a worksheet. So I'm going to create a new routine and call it clear all filters, and the input is going to be a worksheet. I'm going to go ahead and paste this in, and I'm going to replace all instances of worksheet data with the more generic sheet. Cool. So now public subroutine clear all filters takes a worksheet as an input parameter, and it applies this 4-line bit of logic to the input sheet. Our last move here is to identify the places where we copy pasted that code and instead use our new subroutine. So I'm going to drop in call clear all filters, and I'm going to pass in worksheet data. And I'm going to copy that and paste it up here in the same place, because again, we're doing exactly the same thing. We want to clear all the filters on worksheet data. So I'm going to drop in some stops on the clear all filters public subroutine just to make sure that it's working correctly as I walk through the steps. And I want to examine what happens when we get all the way through this subroutine after applying the filters successfully. So I'm going to run the macro here. I'm going to pick my first date as, let's say, the 7th of March. And our last date is going to be, let's say, the 12th of March. Cool. So we can see the filter has been applied. We can see that the data has been copied over as expected. This is the functionality that we already built in that last tutorial, and the article that's linked includes a link to that tutorial in case you're interested. But mostly, I really want to make sure that Clear All Filters works as expected. So we hit our first stop point here. We're calling our newly created Clear All Filters subroutine. I'm going to click play, get to the first line here. We're going to call we're going to set the auto filter mode to false on the passed in sheet, which is worksheet data. Okay, so that undid the auto filter right there. The sheet.filter mode should be equal to false in this case because we don't have any advanced filters applied, but if we did, then sheet.showAllData would clear those advanced filters as well. And so once we click play again, I will put a stop point here before we hit that message box. And we have successfully extracted this functionality into a subroutine. We've saved ourselves some typing, and most important, we can now go to one single place to adjust how the Clear All Filters logic works, which will save you tons of butthurt in the future. Believe me, trying to fix something in a ton of different places is a recipe for disaster. Thanks so much, and please let me know if you have any questions or concerns.